The cruelest invitations are the ones sent with a smile. Claire Bennett stood beneath the glow of crystal chandeliers as the ballroom doors opened before her, and for a moment every sound seemed distant. The soft notes of a string quartet drifted through the air. Champagne glasses clinked somewhere beyond the crowd. Laughter rolled across the room like a warm wave that did not belong to her. At the far end of the grand hall, beneath a canopy of white roses and golden lights, Ryan Bennett turned his head and saw her. A slow smile appeared on his face. The same smile he used whenever he believed he had one. Claire held the invitation in her hand, the edges slightly bent from the number of times she had considered throwing it away. Instead, she had come. Not because she missed him. Not because she wanted answers. And certainly not because she wanted him back. She came because 19 years deserved a proper ending. Guests filled the ballroom in tailored suits and elegant dresses. Most of them knew who she was. Some pretended not to notice. Others glanced at her and quickly looked away. A few exchanged whispers behind careful smiles. Claire recognized many faces from another life. Dinner parties. Holiday gatherings. Charity events. People who once called her family. Now they stood beneath sparkling lights celebrating the man who had replaced her. Ryan adjusted the cuff of his tuxedo as if he were posing for a magazine cover. Beside him stood Madison Reed, nearly 2 decades younger, radiant beneath the ballroom lights. Cameras flashed. Friends gathered around them. Everything looked perfect. That was the point. Ryan had always cared about appearances. Claire remembered the day the invitation arrived. Thick ivory paper. Gold lettering. A handwritten note inside. Hope you can make it. It would mean a lot. She had stared at those words for a long time. Not because she believed them, but because she knew exactly what they meant. Ryan wanted her there. He wanted a witness. He wanted her to see the life he believed was better without her. The life he thought he had upgraded into. A server carrying a silver tray paused nearby. Claire accepted a glass of sparkling water. And offered a polite smile. Her hand never trembled. That surprised even her. 6 months earlier, she might not have been able to walk through those doors. 6 months earlier, the sight of Ryan beside another woman might have shattered something inside her. But time had a way of revealing truths that heartbreak concealed. Across the ballroom, Ryan continued watching her. His expression carried quiet satisfaction. He expected regret. He expected sadness. Maybe even jealousy. Instead, Claire simply met his gaze and nodded once. Nothing more. The gesture seemed to confuse him. For the first time that evening, his smile faded slightly. The music continued. The guests laughed. The wedding planner hurried between tables making final adjustments. Everything appeared flawless. Yet somewhere beneath the polished surface of the celebration, something invisible had already begun to shift. Ryan just didn't know it yet. Standing beneath the glow of 1,000 lights, Claire took a slow breath and looked around the room. She felt calm. Not victorious. Not angry. Simply calm. And sometimes, calm was the first sign that karma had already arrived. The first time Claire saw Madison Reed, she almost missed her. It was a Thursday evening in early October, and rain tapped softly against the kitchen windows of the house Claire had spent nearly 2 decades turning into a home. A pot of tomato soup simmered on the stove. The scent of fresh basil filled the air. Everything looked ordinary. That was what made the memory so painful. Ordinary moments never announce when they are about to become your last. Ryan walked through the front door carrying his leather briefcase. He loosened his tie and placed his keys on the counter with the same familiar motion he had repeated thousands of times before. Claire remembered drying her hands on a dish towel and smiling when she heard him enter. For a brief second, she believed it was just another evening. Then she noticed something missing. Ryan did not smile back. He stood in silence near the kitchen island. His shoulders were tense. His eyes never settled in one place. The grandfather clock in the hallway seemed louder than usual. Tick. 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 Claire waited. Finally, Ryan spoke. His voice was calm. Too calm. The kind of calm people use when they have rehearsed something many times. He told her he was unhappy. He told her they had grown apart. He told her he needed something different from life. The words landed softly, yet somehow hurt more than shouting ever could. Claire stared at him across the marble countertop, trying to recognize the man standing in front of her. This was the same man who once drove 300 miles through a snowstorm just to spend Christmas Eve with her family. The same man who promised forever while sliding a wedding ring onto her finger. Yet now he looked like a stranger wearing Ryan's face. Weeks passed after that conversation. The house became quieter. Ryan spent more evenings away. More business trips appeared on his calendar. More text messages arrived after midnight. Claire never searched through his phone. She never followed him. Deep down, she already knew. Sometimes the truth enters a room long before anyone says it out loud. Then one Saturday afternoon, she saw them together. Not through a dramatic confrontation. Not through some shocking discovery. Just a simple moment outside a waterfront restaurant. Ryan stood beside a younger woman with bright eyes and effortless confidence. They laughed about something Claire could not hear. The autumn wind lifted Madison's hair as Ryan opened the passenger door of his car for her. The gesture lasted only a few seconds. It was enough. Claire remained seated inside her own vehicle across the street. Her hands rested quietly on the steering wheel. She felt no anger. Not yet. Just a strange emptiness. Like watching a chapter close before she had finished reading it. 3 weeks later, Ryan finally admitted her name. Madison Reed. 28 years old. Marketing consultant. Ambitious. Energetic. Different. Ryan listed those qualities carefully, almost as if he were explaining a business decision. Claire listened without interrupting. The dining room light cast long shadows across the table between them. The wedding photo hanging on the far wall suddenly felt like a picture of two people she no longer knew. Then Ryan said the sentence she would never forget. "You are not the woman I married anymore." Silence settled over the room. Claire looked at the man she had loved for 19 years and realized something important. She was not the one who had changed beyond recognition. He was. The divorce became official on a gray February morning. Outside the courthouse, patches of old snow clung to the sidewalks while cold winds swept through downtown Chicago. Claire stepped through the glass doors carrying a single leather folder and a quiet expression. Around her, people hurried toward offices, coffee shops, and train stations. The city kept moving as if nothing important had happened. In a way, that was the hardest part. The end of 19 years felt enormous to her, yet the world remained completely unchanged. Ryan emerged a few minutes later. He shook hands with his attorney, glanced at his watch, and headed toward a black sedan waiting at the curb. He never looked back. Claire stood alone for a moment before walking toward the parking garage. The gold wedding band she had worn for nearly 2 decades rested inside her coat pocket. She could feel its weight with every step. Later that evening, she placed it inside a small wooden box and slid it into the back of a closet. Not as an act of anger. Not as an act of defeat. Simply as a way of closing a door. The following months brought a different kind of loneliness. Friends she thought would remain close slowly drifted away. Some chose Ryan. Others chose convenience. Invitations stopped arriving. Group messages became quieter. Certain people who once called every week suddenly became too busy to return a text message. Claire never complained. She noticed the pattern and accepted it. One Saturday afternoon, she attended a neighborhood charity luncheon she had supported for years. As she entered the venue, conversations softened. Smiles appeared, but they felt different. Polite. Careful. A woman she had known for over a decade approached her table and leaned closer. "I heard Ryan is happier now," she said gently, as if delivering a compliment disguised as sympathy. Claire simply nodded and stirred her iced tea. Across the room, two others whispered while occasionally glancing in her direction. Their expressions carried the same silent conclusion. Ryan had moved on. Ryan had found someone younger. Ryan had won. By summer, social media became impossible to avoid. Vacation photos appeared. Engagement announcements followed. Madison stood beside Ryan on beaches, rooftops, and luxury resorts. The comments below each picture overflowed with congratulations. Fresh start. Beautiful couple. Perfect match. Claire read almost none of them. Still, fragments found their way to her. Sometimes through mutual friends. Sometimes through strangers who assumed she would want updates. One evening, while organizing old files in her apartment, she opened a storage box and discovered a stack of family photographs. There were birthday parties, road trips, Christmas mornings, and anniversaries stretching back nearly 20 years. Ryan smiled from every image. So did she. Claire sat quietly on the floor as sunlight faded beyond the living room window. Then she gathered the photographs, placed them back inside the box, and closed the lid. She realized something important that night. Everyone around her seemed focused on what Ryan had gained. Almost nobody stopped to consider what he had lost. And perhaps the strangest part of all was that Ryan himself had never stopped to think about it either. The apartment was barely 900 square feet, less than half the size of the house Claire once shared with Ryan, yet for the first time in years, every room felt honest. There were no forced conversations echoing through hallways. No tension hidden behind polite smiles. No silence that felt heavier than words. On her first morning there, sunlight spilled through the kitchen window and stretched across the hardwood floor. Claire stood barefoot beside a small coffee maker, listening to the gentle bubbling sound as fresh coffee filled the room with warmth. Outside, Chicago was already awake. Traffic moved below her third-floor window. A delivery truck stopped near the corner bakery. Someone walked a golden retriever along the sidewalk. Life continued, ordinary and steady. 4 months after the divorce, Claire had measured time by loss. The loss of a marriage. The loss of friends. The loss of routines she once believed would last forever. But slowly, almost without noticing, she began measuring time differently. One morning she realized she had slept through the night. Another afternoon she caught herself laughing at something she heard on the radio. Small victories. Quiet victories. The kind nobody applauds. Claire accepted a consulting position with a non-profit organization focused on community development projects throughout Illinois. The salary was modest compared to the life she once lived, but the work felt meaningful. Most days began before 8 o'clock in the morning. She would leave her apartment carrying a leather notebook and a travel mug filled with coffee, then spend hours meeting business owners, reviewing proposals, and helping local programs secure funding. The work challenged her. More importantly, it reminded her that she still had value beyond being someone's wife. Every Friday evening, she stopped at the same neighborhood bookstore. She would browse slowly through the aisles before purchasing a novel or a biography and carrying it home in a paper bag. The cashier eventually learned her name. The barista at the coffee shop downstairs learned her order. Small connections began forming where broken ones had disappeared. One October afternoon, nearly a year after the divorce, Claire found herself standing along the Lake Michigan shoreline. The wind carried the scent of water and autumn leaves. Waves rolled against the rocks below. She wrapped her coat tighter and watched sailboats move across the distance beneath a pale blue sky. For a long time, she simply stood there. Breathing. Thinking. Existing without needing to prove anything to anyone. That was when she realized something surprising. Ryan occupied less space in her mind than he once had. Not because she had forgotten him. Not because the past no longer mattered. But because her future was finally becoming larger than her pain. As the sun began to set, golden light spread across the water. Claire pulled her phone from her pocket and noticed several unread messages. Most were work-related. One was from an old acquaintance checking in. Nothing dramatic. Nothing life-changing. Yet she smiled anyway. The woman who had walked out of the courthouse months earlier carrying heartbreak like a weight around her neck was slowly disappearing. In her place stood someone stronger. Someone calmer. Someone learning that healing was not a single moment. It was a collection of ordinary days stitched together until one morning you woke up and realized you could finally breathe again. Winter arrived early that year. A light layer of snow covered the sidewalks outside Claire's apartment, turning the city streets into ribbons of white beneath the glow of streetlights. Most mornings followed the same comforting rhythm. Coffee before sunrise. A short walk to the neighborhood cafe. A few quiet minutes before work began. It was during one of those ordinary mornings that she first noticed him. He always sat near the front window. Dark coat. Leather-bound notebook. Black coffee. Nothing about him demanded attention, yet somehow he stood apart from the constant flow of customers moving through the cafe. The first few times, they exchanged only polite nods. Nothing more. Claire appreciated that. After everything she had experienced, she had grown fond of simple interactions that carried no expectations. One snowy Tuesday morning, she arrived later than usual. The cafe was crowded. Nearly every table was occupied. As she approached the counter, she realized the last available seat was across from the man by the window. Their eyes met briefly. He gestured toward the empty chair. "You are welcome to sit here if you would like," he said. His voice was calm and unhurried. Claire hesitated for a second before accepting. Outside, snow drifted past the glass while people hurried down the sidewalk with scarves wrapped tightly around their necks. Inside, warm light reflected from polished wood surfaces. The scent of espresso and cinnamon filled the room. For several minutes they worked in silence. Then he glanced at the thick stack of reports beside her laptop. "That looks more serious than my morning reading," he said with a faint smile. Claire laughed softly. It was the first genuine laugh she had shared with a stranger in a long time. His name was Ethan Cole. He explained that he traveled frequently for business and spent several weeks each year in Chicago. Beyond that, he offered very little information. Claire did not ask for more. Over the following weeks, their paths crossed again and again. Sometimes intentionally. Sometimes by coincidence. They spoke about books, architecture, local restaurants, and the endless unpredictability of Chicago weather. Surprisingly, they rarely discussed relationships. Ethan never asked about her divorce. Claire never volunteered details. It felt refreshing to be known for who she was now instead of who she used to be. One evening after work, they found themselves walking along the Chicago River while city lights shimmered across the water. The temperature hovered just above freezing. Their breath formed small clouds in the air. Ethan listened more than he spoke. When Claire described a community project she was helping organize, he paid attention to every detail. When she mentioned a challenge facing one of the non-profit programs, he asked thoughtful questions instead of offering easy solutions. It had been a long time since someone seemed genuinely interested in her thoughts. As the weeks passed, Claire noticed something else. Ethan never tried to impress anyone. He never mentioned expensive possessions. He never talked about status or success. Yet wherever they went, people seemed to recognize him. Restaurant managers greeted him warmly. Hotel staff remembered his name. Business owners treated him with unusual respect. Claire noticed these things but never dwelled on them. She assumed he was simply well connected. What she did not realize was that Ethan carried a story of his own. A story he had not shared with her yet. And as winter slowly gave way to spring, that hidden chapter was quietly moving closer to the center of her life. Spring arrived with steady rain and longer days, and somewhere along the way, Claire stopped counting how long it had been since the divorce. Her life no longer revolved around what she had lost. It revolved around what she was building. One Wednesday afternoon, she sat inside a conference room overlooking downtown Chicago, reviewing documents for a community redevelopment initiative. Stacks of reports covered the table. Financial projections, grant applications, development plans. As she turned another page, a familiar memory surfaced. Years earlier, while Ryan was climbing the corporate ladder, Claire had quietly helped create many of the strategies that fueled his success. She had spent countless evenings researching markets, organizing proposals, preparing presentations, and connecting him with valuable contacts. She never asked for recognition. At the time, she believed they were building a future together. Ryan stood on stages and accepted awards. Ryan received promotions. Ryan became the face people remembered. Claire remained behind the scenes, content to support the person she loved. Looking back, she realized something painful. Ryan had eventually convinced himself that he had accomplished everything alone. The sacrifice became invisible because it had been given freely. A few days later, Claire met Ethan for coffee at their usual cafe. Rain streamed down the windows while pedestrians hurried along the sidewalk carrying umbrellas. Ethan listened quietly as Claire described one of her newest projects. When she finished, he leaned back slightly and studied her with thoughtful eyes. "Do you know something interesting?" he asked. Claire smiled. "What is that?" Ethan tapped a finger lightly against the edge of his coffee cup. "Every time you talk about your work, you describe how other people succeeded. You never describe your own role." Claire laughed softly. "Maybe because it is not about me." Ethan returned her smile. "I think it is more about you than you realize." The comment stayed with her long after they left the cafe. That evening, she opened an old storage box she had not touched in months. Inside were notebooks filled with business plans, handwritten notes, and project outlines stretching back years. She flipped through page after page. There were marketing concepts Ryan had once presented as his own. Growth strategies that originated from late-night conversations at their kitchen table. Networking contacts she had introduced him to. Ideas she had helped shape. Claire did not feel bitterness while reading them. Only clarity. For the first time, she saw the full picture. Ryan had not simply left a marriage. He had walked away from someone who had quietly strengthened every chapter of his success. The following week, another envelope arrived in her mailbox. Thick paper. Elegant lettering. The wedding invitation she had already received months earlier was now followed by a personal note requesting confirmation of attendance. Claire stared at it while standing beside her kitchen counter. Outside, thunder rolled across the city as rain tapped against the glass. She expected to feel anger. Instead, she felt calm curiosity. Ethan happened to call later that evening. During the conversation, she casually mentioned the wedding. A brief silence followed. Not an uncomfortable silence. A thoughtful one. Then Ethan asked a simple question. "Are you going?" Claire looked toward the invitation resting on the counter beneath the warm kitchen light. For a long moment, she said nothing. Finally, she answered. "I think I am." What she did not know was that Ryan believed the invitation would remind her of everything she had lost. He had no idea it was about to remind her of everything she had always been. The ceremony was scheduled to begin at 6 o'clock in the evening, but by 5:30 the ballroom was already glowing with golden light. Crystal chandeliers hung above rows of white chairs. A string quartet played softly near the front of the room. Servers moved quietly between guests carrying trays of sparkling drinks. Everything had been arranged to look flawless. Ryan loved flawless. From her seat near the back, Claire watched people arrive one by one. Familiar faces filled the room. Former colleagues. Old neighbors. Friends who had once shared holidays and celebrations with her. Some recognized her immediately. Their expressions revealed surprise before politeness quickly replaced it. A few approached to exchange brief greetings. Others simply stared from a distance. Claire responded to each glance with the same calm smile. She wore a simple navy dress and a silver bracelet she had owned for years. Nothing extravagant. Nothing designed to impress. Yet there was something different about her now. The nervous energy that once followed her had disappeared. She looked comfortable in her own life. Across the ballroom, Madison stood surrounded by bridesmaids and photographers. Laughter drifted through the room as cameras flashed. Ryan moved confidently among guests, shaking hands and accepting congratulations. Every few minutes his eyes wandered toward the back of the room. Toward Claire. The fact that she had actually come seemed to satisfy him. At least at first. Then something changed. A wedding coordinator approached Ryan and whispered something into his ear. The smile on his face faded for a fraction of a second. He glanced toward the entrance. The coordinator spoke again. Ryan frowned slightly before nodding. The moment passed quickly enough that most people never noticed. Claire did. 20 minutes later, guests were asked to take their seats. Conversations softened. The musicians prepared to begin. Outside, the sun dipped lower behind the Chicago skyline, painting the ballroom windows with shades of gold and amber. The ceremony should have started. Instead, nothing happened. Several minutes passed. Then several more. Quiet murmurs began moving through the crowd. People checked watches. Phones appeared beneath tables. A few guests exchanged confused looks. Near the front, Madison spoke to the wedding planner with visible concern. Ryan attempted to appear relaxed, but his posture had changed. His shoulders looked tighter. His smile no longer reached his eyes. Claire remained still. She folded her hands in her lap and watched the room carefully. Something was unfolding beneath the polished surface of the evening. She could feel it. Not chaos. Not disaster. Just a shift. The kind that happens moments before a truth reveals itself. Then the ballroom doors opened. Heads turned almost instantly. A man stepped inside wearing a tailored black suit. Calm. Unhurried. Familiar. Claire felt her breath catch for a moment. Ethan. He paused near the entrance as several members of the hotel staff immediately approached him. Their expressions changed the instant they saw him. One manager even straightened his jacket before extending a hand. Around the room, whispers began spreading from table to table. Ryan's eyes locked onto Ethan. The color slowly drained from his face. For the first time that evening, the confidence that had carried him through every conversation seemed to disappear completely. And standing beneath the glow of the chandeliers, Claire suddenly realized that whatever happened next, the evening was no longer unfolding according to Ryan's plan. The room seemed to hold its breath as Ethan stepped farther into the ballroom. Conversations faded one by one until only the soft music remained. Claire watched quietly from her seat while hotel executives, event coordinators, and several business leaders moved toward him with unmistakable respect. None of it appeared to surprise Ethan. He greeted each person with the same calm professionalism he had shown during countless conversations over coffee. Across the room, Ryan stood frozen beside Madison. At first, he looked confused. Then recognition appeared. Not the recognition of a friend. The recognition of someone suddenly understanding a mistake. Ethan was not simply a well-connected traveler who spent time in Chicago. He was the founder and chairman of Cole Urban Development, one of the largest private redevelopment firms in the Midwest. His company funded projects throughout Illinois, Indiana, Wisconsin, and beyond. More importantly, his organization had recently acquired controlling interest in a regional development group that Ryan's company depended on for several upcoming contracts. Around the ballroom, whispers began spreading faster than before. Guests checked their phones. Some exchanged surprised glances. Others stared openly. Madison looked from Ryan to Ethan and back again, struggling to understand what was happening. Ethan finally reached Claire's table. His expression softened the moment he saw her. "I hope I am not late," he said with a small smile. Claire laughed quietly. "You have excellent timing." For a brief moment, neither seemed aware of the attention surrounding them. Then one of the hotel executives approached and extended a hand toward Ethan. "Mr. Cole, it is an honor to have you here." The title echoed across nearby tables. Mr. Cole. Several guests immediately recognized the name. Ryan certainly did. Claire noticed the change in his face. She had seen that expression only a few times during their marriage. It was the look he wore whenever he encountered something he could not control. Ethan pulled out the chair beside Claire and sat down. No grand speech followed. No dramatic announcement. No attempt to embarrass anyone. That was what made the moment so powerful. Ethan treated Claire as though she were the most important person in the room, not because others were watching, but because that was how he had always treated her. Nearby, two executives discussed a recent partnership involving Ethan's company. Claire listened only partially. She already understood enough. The mysterious business trips. The respect from strangers. The unusual recognition wherever he went. The pieces finally fit together. Yet what affected her most was not Ethan's success. It was the fact that he had never used it to impress her. Ryan, meanwhile, seemed unable to look away. For years he had measured value through titles, promotions, and public recognition. Now he was watching a man with more influence than he could have imagined choose to spend his evening sitting beside the woman Ryan once dismissed. The irony settled heavily across the room. Ryan had spent years believing Claire's greatest value came from supporting his ambitions. He never realized that her intelligence, loyalty, and strength were qualities others could see just as clearly. As guests continued whispering and the delayed ceremony struggled to regain momentum, Claire felt an unexpected sense of peace. She did not feel superior. She did not feel vindicated. She simply felt seen. And sometimes the most powerful form of karma is not watching someone lose. It is watching them finally understand what they willingly gave away. The ceremony eventually resumed, but something fundamental had changed. The carefully scripted evening no longer belonged to Ryan. The confidence he had carried all day seemed diminished, replaced by a distraction he could not hide. Guests continued smiling. Photographers continued working. Music continued playing. Yet beneath the polished surface, an uncomfortable awareness lingered in the room. People had witnessed something unexpected. Not a scandal. Not a confrontation. A realization. As the reception began, Claire stood near one of the ballroom windows overlooking the city. Chicago shimmered beneath the night sky, thousands of lights stretching toward the horizon. In the reflection on the glass, she could see fragments of the celebration behind her. Laughter. Toasts. Dancing. Life moving forward. Ethan joined her quietly. Neither spoke for several seconds. They simply watched the city below. Finally, Ethan smiled. "You seem peaceful." Claire considered the words before answering. "I am." And she meant it. Across the ballroom, Ryan looked in her direction. Their eyes met briefly. For a moment, neither looked away. Claire saw something she had not expected. It was not anger. It was not jealousy. It was regret. The kind that arrives too late to change anything. Ryan had spent years believing happiness could be measured by appearances. A newer relationship. A younger partner. A bigger success. A better image. Yet standing there beneath expensive lights and surrounded by celebration, he looked less certain than he ever had before. Claire felt no satisfaction in that discovery. Only understanding. Some lessons arrive slowly. Some arrive all at once. The evening continued, but Claire knew her part and it was finished. She thanked a few acquaintances for their kindness, collected her coat, and prepared to leave. As she walked toward the exit, several guests stopped her to say goodbye. Some offered compliments. Others simply smiled. The conversations were brief, but they carried something she had not felt in a long time. Respect. Near the ballroom doors, Ethan caught up to her. Heading out, he asked. Claire nodded. I think I got the closure I came for. Together they stepped into the cool evening air. The city felt calm after the noise of the reception. A gentle breeze moved through the streets while distant traffic hummed beyond the hotel entrance. For a moment, Claire looked back toward the glowing windows high above. 19 years. A marriage. A heartbreak. A rebuilding. All of it felt strangely far away now. Not erased. Not forgotten. Simply finished. Ethan opened the passenger door of a waiting car, but before getting in, Claire paused one last time. She realized that the greatest change in her life had nothing to do with Ryan, Madison, or even the wedding itself. The greatest change was that she no longer needed any of them to validate her worth. She had found that on her own. As the car pulled away from the hotel, the skyline reflected across the window beside her. Claire smiled softly and watched the lights pass by. Ryan had chosen someone younger. He had chased a different future. But somewhere along the way, he lost something he never truly understood. And Claire did not win because he regretted his choice. She won because she had finally become someone who no longer needed his approval. The marriage had ended long ago. The battle ended tonight. And for the first time in years, her future felt larger than her past.